Welcome to the Curious Machine. Think about that little thrill, that feeling you get when you check how many likes your social media post just got, or maybe the view count climbing on a video you shared. That sort of internal rush of happiness when the numbers go up, or maybe that quiet little bit of disappointment when they, don't. That feeling, that's actually your brain anticipating a reward. And right at the heart of this whole system is this really powerful kind of mysterious molecule, dopamine. Now, you've probably heard the term dopamine fasting floating around. It's become this huge viral trend, hasn't it? Promising to reset our brains and help us tackle our digital addictions. But what does that phrase truly mean? Does it actually work? And maybe more importantly, what does the science really have to say about it? So today our mission is to cut through all that noise, understand the scientific truth behind this whole concept, and figure out if it actually offers a genuine shortcut to, well-being.
Right. And to do that, we probably need to start with dopamine itself. What is it?
Well, in simple terms, it's a really crucial molecule. It's produced in specific spots in your brain, places like the substantia nigra and the hypothalamus. Its main job, it acts as a neurotransmitter. So think of it like the brain's internal messenger service, carrying signals between nerve cells, the neurons. But it's way more than just a feel-good chemical. That's a really common misconception, actually. Dopamine has quite a surprising range of vital jobs. It helps control our body movements. It influences memory, our mood, sleep, even how we learn and concentrate. And it even plays a role in milk production in women. But yeah, for our deep dive today, its most significant role is definitely in the brain's reward mechanism.
Okay, the reward mechanism. That sounds key. So if dopamine is tied into that so strongly, how does that actually play out in our daily lives? Especially with all those digital habits we mentioned earlier. That's a great question. And it really gets to a critical misunderstanding about dopamine. A lot of people think dopamine is released when we get the reward, but that's not quite it. It's primarily released when we expect a reward. Think back to Pavlov's dogs, the classic experiment. The dog started salivating, releasing dopamine just at the sound of the bell. Why? Because they anticipated food was coming, not just when they were actually eating it. And that difference, the expectation versus actually getting the reward, that's absolutely key to understanding addiction.
Ah, okay. So it's not the cookie itself, but maybe the smell of the cookies baking that really gets the dopamine going. And wow, it's almost too easy then to see how tech companies could, expertly exploit that, right? Constantly triggering that expectation loop with notifications, likes, little engagement numbers.
Precisely. That distinction is incredibly important, and it's why this whole mechanism is so powerful and, frankly, so easily harnessed. And this has definitely contributed to the really widespread issue of behavioral addictions we're seeing now. Think about behaviors that used to be harder to access, like gambling, maybe compulsive online shopping, pornography, even emotional eating. Now, they're instantly available, often just a click away. We're seeing some statistics suggesting internet addiction affects maybe 3 to 7% of people. But, if you broaden that to include things like gaming and constant messaging, that number might shoot up to over 50%. It's a huge shift.
Yeah, that scale is pretty staggering. So if we think about this problem like, say, a polluted river, you wouldn't just jump in and try to scoop out all the pollution piece by piece, right? You'd ideally go upstream and stop the factory that's pumping the junk into the river in the first place.
Yeah.
How does that idea apply here to understanding and maybe tackling these addictions, especially with this dopamine fasting idea?
That analogy is actually perfect because the real intention behind something like dopamine fasting, at least originally, was precisely about addressing the source upstream, as you put it. The term itself, dopamine fasting, was coined and really pushed into the spotlight by a California psychiatrist, Dr. Cameron Sepulveda, and it definitely caught on. But here's the crucial point right off the bat. Dr. Sipa himself has been quite clear that dopamine fasting is really just a metaphor. He apparently chose the name because it was catchy, memorable. But the goal was never to literally reduce the amount of dopamine in your body. I mean, think about it. You can't really fast from a hormone your brain constantly produces for essential functions. It'd be like trying to fast from breathing or cell division. It doesn't make sense biologically. And kind of ironically, if you did manage to stick to a dopamine fast and felt good about it, felt successful, guess what? You're still releasing dopamine because of that feeling of accomplishment, that expectation of success.
Okay, so you can't actually fast from it, and it's essential for normal brain function. So why did the term dopamine fasting go so viral then? And what are people getting fundamentally wrong about it?
Well, the term itself is powerful, memorable, like we said, But that's led to some major misunderstandings and some really wild interpretations online. If you look around, you see people taking it to really absurd lengths. They might avoid talking to people, stop exercising, cut out music. Some even watch TV only in black and white. It's almost like this self-imposed sensory deprivation, all based on the mistaken belief that they're somehow reducing dopamine. It shows how far the popular idea drifted from the original intent.
Wow, that does sound extreme. Probably not very healthy.
Exactly. And it's important to keep reminding ourselves that dopamine is absolutely crucial for normal brain function, for learning, even just for basic movement.
Yeah.
And we also need perspective on the dopamine response. Yes, using technology, social media can trigger a dopamine increase maybe around 50 to 100% above baseline, but compare that to highly addictive substances. Heroin, maybe a 300% increase. Cocaine, 350%. Some amphetamines can spike dopamine by a staggering 1,365%. So using technology doesn't harden your brain to dopamine in the same way substance abuse does. It's not making your dopamine receptors permanently less sensitive in that same drastic way.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. So if dopamine fasting isn't really about lowering dopamine, what is it actually supposed to be about, according to the person who coined it?
Right. What it actually aims to do, according to Dr. Sipa's original idea, is to help people reduce impulsive behaviors, specifically those problematic behaviors that get rewarded by that dopamine anticipation loop we talked about. The core goal is really about regaining what he called behavioral flexibility.
Behavioral flexibility.
Yeah, basically giving yourself the ability to consciously choose non-addictive options when you're faced with a choice instead of just automatically, impulsively falling back into those problematic habits.
Okay, that sounds much more grounded in psychology.
It is. Essentially, dopamine fasting, stripped of the catchy name, is a kind of popularized version of well-established psychological principles,
Hmm.
particularly something called stimulus control, which is a standard technique from cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT.
Stimulus control.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. It just means making it harder to engage in the problematic behaviors you want to reduce. So things like physically putting your phone out of reach when you need to focus, or making unhealthy snacks less convenient to grab, maybe installing software that blocks problematic websites during certain hours. It also touches on another CBT idea called exposure and response prevention. This includes learning to tolerate a craving or an urge without actually giving into it. Sometimes that's called urge surfing, just riding the wave of the craving until it passes.
Right. Making the impulse harder to act on and learning to sit with the discomfort.
Exactly. And Dr. Sipa even laid out a sort of suggested schedule for applying this, a fasting and feasting rhythm. The fasting periods were recommended in gradually increasing chunks of time, maybe starting with 1 to 4 hours without the specific behavior each day, then maybe one full day each week, like a weekend day, then building up to maybe one full weekend every quarter and even one full week per year.
Okay. And what about the feasting part? And maybe more importantly, who is this kind of approach actually suitable for? When might it genuinely be useful?
Good question. The feasting periods, which he noted were optional, are about setting limits even outside the fasting times. So maybe you decide you'll only check your phone, say, 1 to 3 times a day and only for 5 to 30 minutes each time, setting clear boundaries. As for who it's useful for, look, while it's generally well-intentioned, this method is probably best suited for managing what you might call minor obsessions or compulsive behaviors. Things that haven't really crossed the line into a full-blown clinical disorder. So maybe someone feels they just spend way too much time scrolling social media or perhaps uses certain online content more than they feel comfortable with, but it's not causing severe problems in their life. For those kinds of situations, if the person has the ability to actually control their environment and, crucially, the willpower to stick to the plan they set, then yes, it can potentially help regain some control.
But it sounds like there's some pretty big ifs there
Yeah.
and probably some significant limitations or even dangers.
Absolutely. It's crucial we highlight those. The biggest limitation is that this is not a treatment for true chemical addictions like dependency on drugs or alcohol, nor is it a treatment for severe behavioral addictions like a serious gambling problem. Those conditions require professional help, medical care, psychiatric support, therapy. Trying to tackle them with willpower alone or a self-help trend like this is often ineffective and can actually lead to worse outcomes if it delays real treatment.
That makes sense. Relying on willpower alone when you're dealing with something that powerful is often a losing battle.
Exactly. And another big concern is that the popularity of dopamine fasting can sometimes dangerously trivialize serious psychiatric conditions. It can create this impression that complex mental health issues can be solved with just a bit more individual effort or by following a simple fasting schedule. Plus, for many people, the long term sustainability of these strict schedules is practically zero. Real world addictions are often tangled up with environmental factors, stress, underlying mental health issues, things that are way beyond simple individual control or scheduling.
So it's not really addressing the root causes for many people.
Often, no. And there's one particularly dangerous motivation we sometimes see. Some people misunderstand dopamine fasting as a way to sort of reset their dopamine system to make future pleasures feel more intense. This is a really maladaptive way of thinking. Trying to enhance future highs by abstaining for a bit could actually increase the risk of engaging in more harmful addictive behaviors down the line, including potentially escalating to drug use as they chase bigger and bigger dopamine spikes.
Wow, okay, that's a really concerning potential misuse of the idea.
Hmm.
So when we really boil this all down, it sounds like the core sensible advice hidden inside the hype, things like taking intentional breaks from addictive technologies, being more mindful of our habits, that's not actually new or revolutionary, is it? It feels like psychologists, wellness experts, they've been recommending similar things for decades. You know, digital detoxes, mindfulness practices.
You've hit the nail on the head. Ultimately, dopamine fasting is a catchy, viral term for something much simpler and much more established. It's not about trying to chemically alter your brain's dopamine levels. It's really about applying basic, proven behavioral psychology principles, primarily stimulus control, to help manage impulsive habits that you find problematic.
Right. So while it might offer a useful personal strategy for someone looking to make some minor adjustments to their behavior, it's absolutely vital to recognize its limits. Genuine, debilitating addictions. Those need proper professional medical and psychiatric support. Trying to tackle something really serious with what amounts to a self-help fad could be ineffective at best and potentially harmful at worst.
Precisely. So maybe the real takeaway here, the thing to really think about, is this. What new, perhaps healthier habits or maybe even sources of genuine pleasure might you discover if you consciously decided to create a bit more space in your life? Space created by intentionally limiting some of those unchecked impulsive behaviors. How can you cultivate that behavioral flexibility we talked about to make sure technology and other potential rewards are serving you rather than, the other way around?
That's a powerful question to end on. It really invites some personal reflection on our own relationship with technology, with our habits, those little dopamine hits.
Mhm.
Are they serving us or are we serving them? Something to think about. Thank you very much for sharing this enjoyable conversation with us. Until we meet again tomorrow with a brand new topic, take very good care of yourselves. Goodbye.